Hi, everybody. John Halda here, and I am delighted to have with me David Cooper, who you know. And today we've got Adam Larkin and Matt White with us. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
If you all haven't met Adam and Matt yet, they are strategic advisors of the Culture Index program. And it really blew me away when I started learning about what they're up to. This is an entirely new field for me, and they have graciously accepted an invitation from David and I to come learn more and share it with all of you. So, without further ado, I need to get clear, gentlemen, on exactly what you do, because you gave me a brief, but I don't know that it got through my thick skull. So, I did take away one bullet point that I want to make sure I got right. You're not HR, correct?
That is correct. HR is an important function for any business, but we say we're not HR because we work with CEOs, we work with executives that are trying to scale their business and drive revenue and profitability. And we just know that your human capital typically is the greatest leading indicator of P&L performance in a business. And so we come alongside the C-level executives, the entrepreneurs and the owners, and we give them candid feedback and interpret this data to help them make better decisions about, do they have the right people in the right seat? And then if they're in the right seat, how are we doing leading and managing that human capital to produce the greatest ROI on the payroll and just get the most out of your talent?
And so the core of it, is it correct to say that there's a short survey that really digs into personalities and people traits and whatnot? Is that the Culture Index secret sauce?
Yes, we use a 10-minute survey that gives a better understanding of how people are naturally hardwired since around the age of 12. Now, while we're not a silver bullet, John, what we do is, with a very high level of reliability, we have the ability to see what people's natural superpowers are through a short 10-minute survey. It gives people understanding what their tendencies, what their motivational drives, how they like to communicate, what their work style is, to give you these insights before you start working with people.
Kind of a variation on some of the more traditional personality tests that big corporations have used or other folks have used. Am I thinking it's the same kind of flavor?
It is the same flavor, John. What we do, though, is the difference between what we have in our program versus other human analytics surveys out there. The defining factor is Matt and I. What we do in this program is allow a CEO to speak with another CEO minded individual. We speak, think, and work strategically, just like the CEO of any business would. So when you use the results, the survey is the tool. We end up delivering the program for growth and scale within the organization by mobilizing the data that the survey results provide.
I see. So you partner with the owner, say, of a TSP after his people or his candidates or her candidates have filled out the survey to teach them what the data is telling them and to teach them, hey, this person would be a bad fit in this role or working closely with this person because of these reasons.
That's an aspect. That's one of the functions of it. I mean, most of us, if we're in leadership roles, we were really good at a job and we got promoted. And then we become managers and leaders of people. What we've seen, or I'll speak for myself, but probably Adam too, is many times we get in the organizations that we're working with and they've promoted their talent into leadership roles, but haven't really equipped them with tools to know, how do I treat the other people that I'm leading in the way that they want to, so that they respond positively from a motivation standpoint, from a communication standpoint, from even Adam mentioned superpowers, understanding where does this person draw their natural confidence from. And why that's important is, whatever we're confident in, that's what we gravitate towards. That's why typically, I'm sure if you're listening to this and you've hired somebody, we've probably all made a hiring mistake where we think the interview goes really well, and then they get on the job, and about 90 days later, you're scratching your head because that person just can't do the job of what we hired them for. Well, the reason why that is resume, an interview is just a sales pitch anyway, right? The resume and what they show up like in the interview. The reason why it takes about 90 days to figure out if that person's going to make it or not is because for about 90 days, we can all modify our behavior and try to be somebody we're not. What we do is we say, when we identify, here's what we need in these specific roles in our company, and then we find out the data says this is how this person is wired up to think, to make decisions, to problem solve, and then we put them in roles that they're naturally wired up for. You have a much better alignment, which produces much greater retention and growth.
So taking
I
a
don't
step.
want to. I was going to say I don't want to sell them too much, but John, you've told me for years that that something that my brother and I always had going for us is that we were able to riff off each other. And you have always loved either coming up to Louisville or when we're out somewhere, and Jonathan and I get going and we're firing back and forth and we're firing at each other. I think you and I have that going, and that's why we work so well together. What amazed me is, guys, I don't mean to downplay your all's thing, but like I took the quiz and I'm like, literally when I was taking it, I'm like, what am I doing filling this out? Like I thought it was like the dumbest, one of the worst quizzes I've ever taken. I even have an email that I sent to Sebastian saying, what did you get me into? And then I get a call or get on the Zoom call or voice call like this with these two guys, and they're riffing back and forth with me. They knew me. It's like they had known me my entire life. They knew everything about me. They knew how I ticked, how I worked, how everything. And we were able to have a conversation about our business, about all the bourbon heads behind you that I got for you, right? We talked about each and one of those businesses, and they were asking me what I did in those businesses, what I was doing for those businesses. And then they're like, why are you doing that? You should be doing this, this, and this. And they're naming off everything that you and I say, we got to get to the stage where we can be doing that. Like they pinned me. And it was like having that other, like they say, very high level thinking, entrepreneur mindset, spirit going, dude, wake up. What are you doing? It's big.
So we dovetail off of good to great. It's about getting the right people in the right seats on the bus. So John, to extend the answer that Matt gave you about what we survey and how we use it, when we look at external or internal candidates, what these survey results do, as David mentioned, which is we get a better understanding immediately of who that person's going to be 6 to 9 months down the road after you've hired them, once the new car smell has drifted away from their initial employment in that particular position. But what that does in helping the CEO is identify potential issues before they exist. This is why we call it a leading indicator of P&L performance. We have all hired employees that looked great in the interview session, right? And then we're like 6, 9 months down the road, we say, what happened to that person that said they could do X, Y, and Z, and what their performance is saying A, B, and C. So it helps us really identify what the company needs from a position standpoint and match it up with the data that our human analytics provides to the CEO.
This sounds, because I've worked at big companies, and forgive me, this isn't a slight, but this sounds very corporate, right? And I'm sure it has a great role with C-suites and other things. But getting down to brass tacks, does this work if you are a owner of a 12 truck line haul operation? You and your spouse both work in it. Your spouse might be doing some things, you're doing some things, and maybe you have a senior driver, and then you've got a bunch of drivers. Does it work down at the not C-suite level? Does it have value there?
I've got a company that they own multiple companies. One of those is a truck line, and we use 3 graphs to help companies scale. And the third graph is essentially a position analysis. So, for example, they're hiring a lot of drivers. Well, they do a lot of hazmat transport, and so they came and said, "Is there a way to figure out like whether or not person is like driven to like be perfect and like follow the rules, not cut corners?" I said, absolutely, we measure. That's a construct that actually everyone has that trait. They just have the drive or the motivation in varying degrees. And so we do this position analysis, and they say, okay, well, this is the ideal driver profile. They verify that based off their top drivers and say, does the traits of their top drivers look like what we think we need in this job? And it's like, yeah, it's a match. And so then, yeah, you use it on the front end of the selection process. And, this is a data point. right? There's a lot about a human we don't measure in terms of their character, values, work ethic, integrity and things like that. But we do measure their motivational drive. And when you get drivers sitting in the seat that systematically work through their checklist and their safety protocol before they step in that cab, with confidence, I got a higher likelihood of success of these having a good track record if their primary motivational drive in life is to follow the rules and be perfect. And so depending on this is industry agnostic, and also it doesn't matter what size of the company it is. We work with, publicly traded companies down to entrepreneurial companies. And I would even say this, on the entrepreneurial side, when you've got a small team, you've got 15, 20, 30 employees, that's a small rowboat. And if you've got one of those 20 or 30 employees rowing in the wrong direction, that has a massive effect on the trajectory of that boat. So yes, it does. And we help a lot of entrepreneurial companies with this.
Yeah, I mean, I would say even down to, going back to what Nolan Wilson hit on at our last safety stand-up there in Charlotte, where he said, know what you're good at, know your strengths, and then find either another individual or find a vendor for everything else. I think as a single owner of one of these small companies, right, even if you had 3 or 4 trucks with any of the carriers, but if you're a small line haul owner and you've got a couple trucks, knowing what your strengths are and knowing where you should be spending your time, and then going to the network, going to the community and finding companies or other players to handle the other parts of your business, I think that could lead to more success.
So, Matt, you went into detail about using it as a screening tool for new hires, right? With the driver example. Do you also then, if you start working with a company, so back to my fictional example, if they're hiring drivers, they should be using this in your analytics, human analytics, to understand who they're potentially going to hire. Do you recommend that folks also survey all their existing people and look at the data with you to understand, do I have somebody in the wrong seat, or do I have a potential problem child that I haven't discovered yet?
Do you want to take this, Adam, or you want me to?
Sure. So what we do when we get a better understanding of how people are naturally hardwired, it allows us to get the insights of what their motivational drive is. And we may very well end up with an employee that we consider to be a square peg in a round hole. We highly recommend that our clients survey all their employees. And the reason why is these are another data points that say, for example, if you're the business owner, of saying, Adam, we have Bob, and he is a driver. Safety scores, always 100%. If you bring us 5 more Bobs, if we can identify 5 more Bobs, great safety scores, worries over the details, make sure they get their loads in where they need to be on time. That's what Bob does, and I need 5 more of those. We can help the client identify that. This mobilization does more than just get the right people in the right seat. The program delivers 2 things that CEOs want more of always: time and money. So if we get the right types of personalities driven or hardwired to do the job that you need them to do, for example, with safety, then the CEO doesn't have to worry about it. They don't have to get to the tactical level, which then saves them time to work on the business versus being in it.
But back to my example, you survey all the drivers and you go back to the owner and you say, listen, you're Bob and you're Frank. Oh my God, yes, they're the right people. They're safety focused, etc. Right? Joe, on the other hand, is a ticking time bomb. Everything is screaming that he is just an accident waiting to happen. He's going to be texting. He's going to be distracted. He's not going to want to do the pre-trips. He's not going to do this. He's going to pay lip service to it. I mean, is that something you talk about with folks when you work with them?
100%. So John, well, let's take that. So it's not that they are doing those types of activities. What we do is identify the why, because then we can see, well, the reason why this person is distracted on their texting is because they may be bored in the role. It may not be a challenge. They may not be getting the thing that motivates them. So then what Matt and I will do is take that person and say, where can we leverage this person in a different part of your business that is more suited to that person's personality profile? Then what we may find is they're challenged, they can relate or connect if that's what they desire to do, or they're more conducive to doing a different role in the business. Thereby, the CEO can leverage the time and investment that they put in that employee because that person may very well be engaged. They're just not enjoying the work that they're doing.
Is it hard? Because I'm assuming you also have the owner take the survey, right? Does that lead to some awkward conversations where you have to tell the owner, hey, buddy, our guess is that you're finding it very difficult to motivate for these areas which you have some responsibility for? Do you get into some awkward conversations where you're telling people you should not be doing this?
So we're known for radical candor. And so when an owner, when an entrepreneur, CEO, whoever takes the survey, our clients pay us to interpret the data. And Adam and I have profiles where, we like people in small amounts, but we don't care about whether or not they like us. We care about helping them win. And if you've got an owner that's struggling to hit their growth goals, and it might be because they're not wired up and naturally for that, we help them understand why that is. And then who do you need around you so that you stay spending more of the time in the things that are motivating to you than trying to do things that you're not gifted for?
So take it a step further with what Matt said. David took the survey several months ago. And when we reviewed his results, the first question that we asked David before we went through the review was this: David, may we have your permission to speak candidly and directly about your personality survey? Now, John, rarely do we get the word no, right? But what we're doing is establishing this clear line of communication and truthfulness. And this is what we are trying to do. We are telling the CEO what they need to hear, not necessarily what they want to hear. What we want to hear is everyone's happy, everyone's engaged, your business is moving forward. But you may not be getting that level of objective feedback from the employees. So if I go to a standard employee and say, hey, how are you doing? The natural tendency to say, oh, I'm doing great. When inside, they may be dying because the work that they're having to do is not conducive to what their natural personality style is.
You really know. How often do you get an eager yes versus a nervous yes?
We get the nervous yes because the CEO will have identified, when I have a leadership team around me, I have questions about. I'm not really 100% sure if the person that is sitting next to me at the executive leadership table is the type of person that moves my business forward along with me. So there may be a nervous yes in the answer, but then again, because we've asked for permission, we don't give opinions. We are just reading data. And when we read the data, it becomes more objective and truthful to the CEO, which is what they need to hear to make better business decisions for their people.
One of the patterns I see with TSPs frequently is you'll have, the fictional example again, a husband wife team and maybe another person in their back office. And then I look at what each of them does. And I think to myself, God, their lives would be so much better if they would start trading certain responsibilities. Because even without the knowledge of what your proprietary system does from a data analytics standpoint, you can just see that person's not detail oriented. Why are they doing that role? Whereas that person loves the mundane, fire it through assembly line, and they will do it detail and focus. And that's actually what charges their batteries. But they're doing each other's jobs. And is that part of this counseling, this work that you do?
Absolutely. When we bring on clients, we train the leaders in a 2-day workshop. So it's an investment because you are investing time and resources, money into the training of your leaders to equip them with this data to know, one, what does it mean? What motivates people? Number two, how do I communicate? How do I motivate? How do I lead my people the way they are going to respond positively to, so that we're getting more engagement and better productivity out of that payroll? So they are relying on us as advisors, but our job is to train them the best we can so that they eventually don't need us because they know this data so well and they're applying objective data on their people issues and their people decisions on a daily basis. And so when one of the things clients walk out of after our workshop, they walk away with a cheat sheet. See, there's about 5% of the world has the same pattern. And what we're really trying to do is say, hey, the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But if you look at our data, it says about 5% of go ahead.
I didn't follow. 5% of the world has the same pattern. So what's the other 95%? Chaos?
Yeah, that's why we have great jobs and we'll always be in business, because most of us were raised, treat other people the way you want to be treated. Well, our data will show there's 19 patterns. So if you do the math, roughly 5% of the world fits into one of those categories. But we typically treat the other 18 animals in the zoo the way we want to be treated instead of the way they want to be treated. And that's why there's communication issues. And that's why there's bottlenecks. And that's why if I naturally play offense, I expect everybody else to think like an offensive mindset. But 50% of the world plays defense. And so we're going in and saying, stop treating people the way you want to be treated. Learn how to treat them the way they want to be. And when I say treat, I mean, how do you communicate? How do you motivate? When someone's going to make a decision, do they want all the data and facts first, or do they want to talk it out with you? If I've got, let's just use a typical example. If I've got a hunter sales role, this guy's just growing business, I find somebody who naturally plays offense and stop trying to get a defensive player to play offense.
That makes more sense. Thank you for the explanation, because you lost me with the 5% thing.
Yeah, it's not that the other 95% are different. It's that there's 20 groups of 5%, and you got to figure out how to talk to each of those.
Yeah, Matt said this multiple times. We get into workshops. We represent 5% of the people walking the face of the planet. But what that also means is that we speak, think, and work differently than 95% of the people walking the face of the planet. And we wonder why we have challenges at work, communication challenges. So, for example, David is a visionary pattern. And as a visionary pattern, he does not want all of the details necessary to get things done. He just needs a goal. But when we consider drivers, for example, we have to get relatively specific. This is where you need to be. This is the load that you need to pick up. This is the time by which you need to deliver it to another place. And these are the contracts, forms, etc., that need to be signed before you leave that place. There are some personalities that require that level of specific information so that they can deliver on the promises that the company is delivering to their clients.
So, in hearing this, and I like to pretend I'm a smart person, so humor me, okay? It's kind of scary to me to think that if I embrace this, I've got to learn 20 different ways to interact with people. So what do you do to equip people, and how big of a lift is it for most of your clients to get their head around that and to learn these skills?
It's a great
But
question.
the format by which we do our program is when we teach and train leaders on this data, we will take the survey results from their own employees. So the way that we teach it is based on the foundation of their own employees. So this is what we get to do, John, is you have observational context of dealing with these employees on a daily basis. What Matt and I deliver is data and statistics to fit over the top of your observational context and what your gut tells you about that person. So when you use the people that you know and work with on a regular basis, and then we add that data and statistics, it becomes much more, you can absorb it easier because you see these people, you know how they are. See, what Matt and I do, this is our subject matter expertise. We spend all of our time studying and interpreting the data that come through the results of these surveys. So we can recreate conversations that you've had with other people based on your personalities. And it is somewhat scary because we were able to give those insights, and we'll say, well, this is what a natural tendency of this person is to say when you give them this feedback. And when we say that, they're pretty much amazed because like, yeah, I had that conversation yesterday with this person on exactly that same thing. Again, it shows the reliability of the data, but it also shows how can we minimize the time associated with communicating with someone, for example, because I can say with David, for example, give him the outcome, give him the freedom to achieve that outcome, and he will be back with that outcome. With other people, if we do the same thing, they will be back in our office asking us 1,000 questions, which bleeds the CEO's time. And then they're scratching their head as to why they're sitting in their office at 7 p.m. at night. Our job is to give them part of their life back as well.
So, quick sidebar, David, as a visionary, your goal is to get your expenses in within a month of them happening. I'll leave you freedom to figure out how to do that.
And then we're going to hire an executive assistant to allow David to hand that information off to someone so that he doesn't have to do it. So, David, John, you cracked an egg, so let's cook it, which is this. When we find CEOs, there is value to a position within a business. A CEO may get paid, let's say, $100,000 a year. The value of their time is anywhere from 7 to could be 20x within the business. So, for example, that person the CEO may be paid $100,000 a year, but the value in the business is $2 million a year. So, using the expense reports, if I can pay someone $20 an hour, when I pay myself $600 an hour, right? If I pay someone to do the administrative work, for example, then I free up David's time to be able to work on his business, set goals for the future, and grow and scale his business so that he doesn't get caught in the weeds of something that is not productive work for a CEO.
I love that you called it out that way. It wasn't the lesson I was trying to point out, and I love that you did. But going back to what you were saying before, and I've experienced this so many times, it's like I feel I'm talking across someone, and we eventually say we're saying the same things, but we're saying it a different way. So what you provide is the insight to say, look, you've had all these conversations, you know how to work with these folks. This is how they're wired. And once you understand how they're wired, if at least one of you knows how the other person's wired, you have a much better chance of making the communication effective and quicker.
It is like learning a new language.
Yeah, I would have to think at some point too, you will figure out that, hey, this is oil and vinegar and it's never going to gel, right? And it's probably a best decision for these two people to not be in the same organization, or at least working closely together, because one's never going to provide the type of communication that the other person's going to hear. Has to play, right? There can't be everybody figures out that 1 in 18, right? There got to be 2 of the 20 that don't go together.
I mean,
yes.
There was a famous book, Men Are from Mars and Women Are from Venus. Kind of the same concept here, that we're wired differently, right? But they probably oversimplified it based on genders in that book.
Yeah, and there's a distinction. We do not measure anything related to race, gender, ethics, religion, nothing clinical or abnormal. And we actually don't ascribe to the male, female, or hardwired differently. We have seen similar patterns, male and female executives, for example. You have David as visionary pattern. We have with a female, same pattern. They still will exhibit the similar tendencies, but people are different, and we observe that on a day-to-day basis in business. And again, what Matt and I produce is the human analytics, or the science called psychometrics, to give you a better understanding of not what they are doing, but why they are doing
it. I want to be respectful of y'all's time, because I know that you had to move things around for this, and you probably have a hard stop coming up soon. But I want to ask a few questions, because folks watching this may not have the luxury of getting to have this long conversation with you, and I want to try to speed their world up if they're watching. How does a small business owner, and I'm going to bring it back to our crew, the TSP owners, the line haul operators, what are the right signals that a TSP owner should be paying attention to say, wow, what Matt and Adam do really could change my life? What are the sort of aha moments that if they're seeing it in their world, they should be calling you to explore maybe getting some help? I mean, with a doctor, it's easy. If your arm is bleeding and hanging off at a weird angle, you know you need to see somebody, right? What are some of the obvious tells that someone should call you? Or maybe what are the false tells to save them time that, no, that's not something we deal with?
Make it really simple. most of the entrepreneurs and CEOs that we serve, they're looking at, are we hitting our revenue goals? Are we making the margins or the EBITDA that we need to? And then, do I have a life, or is my life my business? Do I make $2 million a year and have a really expensive job, or am I making $2 million a year and able to work 30 hours a week if I want to, or go to Baja and spend a week and the business still run and make money without me? And what we've seen is a lot of times the entrepreneurs and the smaller businesses, they're wearing multiple hats, they're doing 4 or 5 different roles, and they're really good at the job, but they're spending too much time working in the business and not enough time working on the business. And then typically, now that could be because they actually have a profile that just wants to be in the business. If that's what they want, okay. But a lot of entrepreneurs see the vision, they take the risk, they start it, and then they inevitably find, man, I'm spending so much time doing the work instead of building the business. I'm just going to work harder. And we say, you don't have to. If you want a better life balance and you want to make a lot of money and you still want to have a marriage that's good or time with your kids, then that will largely depend on the caliber of the talent that you have around you. And do you have the right people in the right seat? Jim Collins said, if you have to tightly manage somebody, you made a hiring mistake. And what I've seen is many leaders in businesses spend too much time managing the weak and neglecting the strong. And that's an avenue where we spend a lot of time giving candid feedback to the CEOs of and it's almost like they've become accustomed. They're just used to having to tell people what to do all the time. And that's because inevitably a lot of entrepreneurs, highly risk tolerant, they started the business and they're decisive. So they got people around them who would take orders. And then inevitably they get a whole bunch of order takers around them. And then they find out, I got $3 million in revenue and I'm working 70 hours a week because no one else can make a decision. Because that's who you chose to be around you, people who are looking for direction all the time.
So, John, you had mentioned, what separates Matt and I from the human analytics surveys, and there are plenty of them out there. One of the things that we identify early on when we have conversations with CEOs is identifying those 3 things. What is your personal life? What are your goals for your business? What is your exit strategy? Is it to grow into a monster? Is it to exit out with or do a merger and acquisition, to be acquired, whatever it may be? We establish these goals at the very front because while we are subject matter experts in the human analytics data itself, what we are business experts. And we try to take this data, mobilize it to some area of the P&L where the CEO is experiencing pain. So we help you identify where those areas are so that you can fix it. Most of the human analytics surveys out there, they have a really nice report. Let's say DISC, for example. It gives you a really nice, colorful 50-page report that David Cooper is never going to read. And the reason why is because if you give me the executive summary, David's like, just give me the net, right? What we try to do is identify the challenge that the CEO has, what parts of the P&L are not performing where they need to perform, allow us to identify the areas of those people, and then make decisions to fix the problem. It's the action item associated with improving the business, not just the data itself. And that's probably the biggest difference between what we provide versus any other human analytics survey result out there.
Looking at it through a slightly different lens, if there are TSPs watching this who are going home at the end of the day and saying to themselves, why is it so hard to get my people to do what I want them to do? Why is it so hard to affect change in my own company? Don't I own it? Is that another signal that they should be talking to you, or is that a different thing that you guys don't address?
Absolutely, that's a signal. And that's one of the challenges that we spend a lot of time helping the CEOs understand why they're not getting what they want out of their people, why it's so difficult to get them to do what they want. And then we have candid conversations. Essentially, you talked about this earlier about like, man, isn't it a heavy lift to know there's all these different patterns and things like that? It's like, yeah, and Adam mentioned it is a little bit like learning a new language. But also, and maybe this is a crude example, but like, this is like playing chess. There's about 7 different pieces on it, or maybe 6 different pieces on the chessboard. And each one of those pieces has a unique ability and position that they can do and moves that they can make on that chessboard. And if the game is winning the game of chess, good chess players, A, are strategic, but B, they know how to use all those different chess pieces. Well, we're all just a chess piece. We're going to help them be able to quantify, here's what kind of chess piece this is. That means they do really well at this stuff, they're going to struggle with this stuff. So you put them in roles where they're naturally gifted to go and do that, and then you don't have to manage them.
And presumably, if you're an owner and you've got 15 drivers, a senior driver or two, and 1 or 2 back office people, maybe a spouse and a back office person, you really only have to learn the 5 people who report to you, right? You don't have to learn every driver, because your senior drivers now need to learn what motivates their people, right? I mean, it's kind of why you keep the team small. If you have 20 direct reports, you're suffering for a whole lot of different reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a leadership program, John. And so, again, we look at the areas of responsibility, who we connect with the most, and engage in the training of awareness of the data to create a strategically aligned business where the CEO doesn't have to go into the front line of business on a regular basis. So we help identify how do we effectively promote really strong leaders to, again, replace the time associated with the CEO having to go down into the business.
I'd like to say
David,
this too, because go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to say, David, I don't know if you prep them to talk to me like I'm a 3rd grader, but it's really working. So thank you.
No, I mean, I was going to hit on the point they hit on that was like the big aha moment for me. And it's some of the brightest guys out there, I think, in the space that I've learned a ton from over the years have been using these different analytical tools to interview drivers ahead of time. When we started doing EOS 4 or 5 years ago now, or 3 years ago now, I guess it was, we quickly identified, one of the things there was identifying your target customer. And we kind of said that our target customer was drivers, because we were always trying to get drivers to work for us, right? We had all the freight in the world hauling for the big guys in purple. We didn't have to go find new customers, new freight. We just needed to find drivers, right? We were a staffing agency. Now I say you're a safety company and staffing agency. Back then you were a staffing agency. But we went and we analyzed, okay, what drivers are the best for us? And then we went and tried to find more like them. We had to do it the old way, right? We had to interview and ask a whole bunch of questions and try to figure out what makes these people tick. You guys got the tool for that. I mean, I think this could be huge in the recruiting side of figuring out, the right people for your organization.
But there's been a lot of focus on the screening. Yeah. Go ahead, Matt. I think you're probably going to say the same thing.
The recruiting piece is very important, but the truth is we only spend 20 to maybe 30% of our time helping clients identify what are the patterns that they're looking for, what are the traits that drive success in these given roles, and then discussing the results of different applicants for that job. That only takes about 20 to 30% of our time, because it's not rocket science. Once you know, hey, these 3 patterns are our top driver profiles, let's go hunt those people. Okay. And this is what I was going to mention earlier. What we haven't talked a lot about when you're talking about the TSP. I think that was the phrase, and you got owner operators, and then they got a key person, and then drivers. Is anybody ever struggling with like losing or not retaining their key people? Because that's where there's so much value. And, I mentioned at the beginning, we use 3 graphs. One graph tells me who a person is. The second graph tells me how they are modifying who they are to meet the demands of the current job. We call that actually a management report card. And so we spend a lot of our time helping our clients look at their A players and ensure that A player is going to stick around in 18 months or 3 years from now, because they are managed the way they want to be, and they're given the opportunities that they need to feel like they're progressing in their career. So we're not career counselors, right? But we know this, that if I take a David who is extremely autonomous and I give him lots of freedom and lots of opportunity to decide where he wants to take this thing, and I empower him with the authority and the decision-making power to go and do it, he's not going to be looking for another job, because he's got everything once right here working for me. But if I take David, who's highly entrepreneurial and unmanageable, and say, here, sit in this cubicle and herd these cats over here, he's already looking for another job. So we do proactively as advisors look at the key people that are helping their CEOs drive the growth in their company and calibrate and say, this person is significantly modifying who they are. That may be a snapshot in time. Maybe they're working on some kind of special project, but if this doesn't change over time, we're not going to retain that person.
Through that data, what Matt is talking about through this management scorecard is we can tell an organization's employees whether they are checked out, disengaged, they have low morale. If they're stressed out, overworked, we can tell in the data if someone is doing the work of someone else in their area of responsibility. We can also identify flight risks. And one of the things that I have worked with my clients, we can tell if someone is looking for a new job on your company's Wi-Fi. And we have proven that out multiple times. But it's objective data that you don't typically get unless you spend a lot of time asking the questions. The data really replaces a lot of those questions that you don't have the time to ask on a regular basis.
Gentlemen, when you, and this is not to poke at the name culture index, but there's a lot of conversations that happen at the Line Hall Summit and offline about company culture. And loosely, my experience has been that when you meet TSPs who have great retention with drivers, they'll say, well, we have a great company culture. And they're probably not all working with you yet, but I think from what I'm hearing, that's a story of the company is succeeding, and they're succeeding because they have the right people in the right seats, and everybody feels engaged in doing things that they're already intrinsically motivated to do, so they love where they're at. Because there's a lot of sort of hocus pocus around culture. And I think in a previous conversation, Matt, you joked, it's not words on a wall, it's not a fancy slogan, right? It's about winning. It's about feeling like as a team member, you're on a winning team and you're having fun and you're doing what you're motivated to do. Is that a fair statement so far?
It is.
Because I've always wondered what the hell culture is. It's as fuzzy to me as marketing, right? The famous Dilbert cartoon where they send Dilbert to marketing and for 4 weeks, and he shows up in the marketing department. There's a big banner over the door that says, "Welcome to marketing, 2-drink minimum." Right? It's always been fuzzy to me, and I'm an engineer. I'm detail oriented. I think I'm starting to connect the dots that it's about understanding how people are wired, and if you put them in a role that they're going to be successful at, and they're automatically going to instinctively succeed at, you create a culture. And yes, Matt, we've done the numbers at different sessions at Line Hall Summit. Losing a driver is extremely expensive. And in as much as a driver is going to another company where they pick up a trailer and take it somewhere else, there's no difference in their job, but there is, because it's who they're working with and who they're working for, right? And it's not often it's not about they got 2 cents more a mile. It's something else.
Yeah, what's the number one reason people leave a job? How they're treated. So we're giving managers of talent a playbook, for lack of a better word, to understand how each one of those 19 patterns wants to be talked to, motivated, managed, and allocated work.
Forgive me, I just noticed the clock, and I know that you all have a hard stop, and I want to respect that. David, I'll give you room for one last question. If you don't, I've got one, and then I'm going to let them go because they've been so generous with the time.
Shoot away.
Adam, you mentioned earlier Good to Great. I caught you saying that. And then Matt, you mentioned Jim Collins. I'm guessing, because I think that's the author of Good to Great. Am I correct?
Correct.
Seminal business book, probably top 10 all time in terms of business books. If folks haven't read it, you recommend it?
Highly.
If someone watching this wants to dip their toe in the water to understand a little more about the science and of what you do, they can't replace the coaching, but if they want to just understand it better before they call you, is there something that Culture Index produces, a publication? Is there something they can read or watch to learn a little more, to arm themselves with information as a stepping stone to reaching out to you all?
Due to the proprietary nature of this instrument, the best way to understand or even get an idea of what Culture Index could do is you just take the 7-minute survey, which I think everybody that comes to the conference will have access or the opportunity to take that survey. And that's what we're teaching on. We'll do a high level overview of what that data is, but that's typically what we do on a daily basis with people that are interested in the program. Say, look, take the 7-minute survey, and we can read this data in 15 minutes, and you'll know at the end of 15 minutes, either this could really help me, or I learned a little bit more about myself, but not interested.
And if there's a compelling reason for them to extend that conversation, we can do a diagnostic of their team. And to your point, John, different cultures of all different types of businesses. This is a program that is tailored to that specific business rather than a general, this is our canned approach. So what we do is we understand the culture, the business goals, the mindset of the CEO, and we tailor the program using the tools to deliver what they need. So our job is to create a compelling reason of this data to say, do I have the right people surrounding me to get to my business goals or not? And I think I might want to ping Matt or Adam to see, do I have that? Do I have those people? And if not, how can I fix that issue?
Adam Larkin, Matt White, thank you so much for your generous contributions to our community by telling us about this and educating us. We will, if it's okay with you, provide your contact info when we publish the video. We're recording this end of March in 25. We're going to see you in a few weeks, in 4 weeks in Dallas. And I can't wait to see your presentation. If you're watching this afterwards, I'm sure that they would be happy to share with you what they presented there if you reach out and call them directly. Thank you all. And David, thank you for joining us as always.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very
for the
much.
opportunity.